Hey guys, it's Vanessa from True Crime in Colorado. I know it's been a while since part 5, but took some time to plan out a bunch of things for the channel's future content, set up a place to film, and lined up some new things for you guys to enjoy coming soon. We have a few videos coming out this week, and in our new videos coming up in March, we're going to have a new format. We also took a poll in our Patreon regarding the NK series. So in our poll on our Patreon, we asked our members specifically what topics they wanted to hear about in the next episodes. The response that we got was at least 3 more topics, so 3 more episodes. So we'll complete those 3 episodes, and then as we get new information or new requests for specific episodes, we'll make those. So I don't really want to put an end cap on it because we just don't know at this point. This video is going to be a little bit shorter because it's basically a transitional video into part 7. I wanted to go over some of the information that she gave them on September 4th and also revisit and review a couple of the things that we've been harping on that we think are important. So let's jump into part 6. We left off on part 5 on August 23rd, 2018 with NK talking about how she had been fired from Tasman Geosciences on August 22nd. She had reluctantly turned over her phone to CBI, and they told her they'd get back to her in a week or so. After this interview, we see that some texts are exchanged between NK and Agent Kobach. Earlier in the day on August 23rd, prior to her interview, we see her texting Agent Kobach at 4 a.m. in the world that has no boundaries with her in her texting, and she's pushing him for approval on a therapist. She then tells him that the SIM card on her old phone is broken and she's going to go to Verizon when they open at 10 a.m. She tells Agent Kobach that luckily she remembers much more now. It's not a lot, but she's typed up pages and pages of information and they're trying to decide on a date when she can come and give it to him. It's still unbelievable to me that after deleting all of the evidence and content between her and Chris on August 14th, that she has continued this freedom and flexibility in dealing with her phone. So they're fine with her going to Verizon to talk to them about her phones, to change out her SIM card. She's able to run interference, or in her terms, damage control with her friends, with Charlotte on what they should delete on social media, and with their phones. In a case of this magnitude, it's just frustrating, it's confusing, and mind-boggling. After the interview, NK texts Agent Kobach at 6:30 p.m. and lets him know that she watched Chris's old speech on relationships. I will link this video in the description for anyone who hasn't seen it. Agent Kobach asks her what she thought of it, and she replies that it was quote-unquote eerie and that it made her feel like she wasn't the first woman he's dated outside of marriage. I find this interesting. I have watched the video and it is eerie in that he describes factors that can lead to the disintegration of a relationship, and what happens with he and Shanann kind of plays out like his speech, but they're pretty standard issues that can arise in any relationship. NK has spent this entire time emphasizing how much of an introvert Chris is and how it's so rare that he would open up to anyone, and that it was her specifically who had had that effect on him. Now, in my opinion, she's kind of flipping the script here, or saying that she thinks it's possible all of a sudden that he had other affairs. This isn't the only time that she does this. It seems to pop up when it might be convenient for her, and it's not consistent with the rest of the flow of what she's been talking about in all these interviews. My reason for bringing this up is only that it's my opinion there's a narrative that's beginning to be pushed here, and I'll dive deeper into that in part 7. So NK and Agent Kobach continue discussing when she can come in and give him this new information. Then on Wednesday, the 29th at 9:45 a.m., NK texts Agent Kobach with a question. I personally think this is important, just my opinion. NK texts him, "Did you see the news?" He replies with yes. Then she replies back with, "Think that's a real claim? If so, think you can find him?" He replies with no idea and yes. Did he ever mention anything about that? Her response is, "Not at all. I don't know if I believe this yet, but he fooled me into thinking he was a much different person, so anything is possible. But I do have some dates for things that he said that I think are in line with what this guy is claiming. I already had them on my list to talk to you about. As we know, these messages are in reference to Trent Bolt, and Trent Bolt came out to the media on August 28th saying that he was the ex-lover of Chris. So what jumped out to me is this. We are 2 weeks out from the murders. She's been spending all of these interviews saying that Chris murdered his entire family for her. You know, we have these contradictory statements. At first, she didn't know him. Then the relationship was so intense that they were looking for, a place for him, and he murdered his entire family, and she said just for her. But now, 24 hours after this story comes out with this person coming out of the woodwork saying they had a relationship, she contacts Agent Kobach about it, is ready to jump on the story and believe it. Not only that, but she says that she's already added it to the information that she has to give him. And then the most interesting part of that is her saying that the quote-unquote timeline adds up. Again, we're going to take you down the rabbit hole with this in part 7 and all of the interesting things that we did find. But before you get to part 7, after this video, you might want to check out our video on Trent and NK. It's under 4 minutes, and I will link it in the description as well. NK and Agent Kobach go on to discuss the article by Shakedown, naming her as Chris's girlfriend. She tells Kobach that they're grasping at straws, which is kind of an odd statement just because Shakedown was correct in that she was the mistress. NK goes into the CBI office to give her typed out information that she has remembered on September 4th, 2018. When NK gets there, Agent Kobach advises her that Detective Baumhover will now be her point of contact. Interestingly, even though there's another 2.5 months until Chris will plead guilty, we don't see any correspondence or any kinds of interviews or discussions in Discovery between Detective Baumhover and NK. She hands them a 7-page document with the information that she's remembered, and it also says in Discovery that at that time they took possession of her iPhone 6. He does note in the report that she's previously surrendered, is his term, her phone to Agent Kobach, and he's referring to obviously when they took it in the last interview and ran it through Celebrite. I just personally think it's a little odd that they waited until September 4th to actually make her surrender the phone. So she hands them the 7-page document that she's typed out, and the very first thing it says is that she asked Chris when he and Shanann had decided to separate, and he said late March or early April. So one thing I always look out for when I'm reading about these cases or reviewing discoveries is coincidences. And that's a whole nother topic, but one of the oddest parts about this case, and this has been talked about by many, many people across all kinds of platforms and forums and groups, is all of the just convenient quote-unquote coincidences. So we know that the late March, early April timeframe is also the exact same timeframe that NK started working with Chris at Anadarko. So it's very nice and convenient that they decided to separate the minute that she started working there. And also around the exact same time that coworkers say that they start seeing them talking in very close proximity in hallways. And also, when Trent Bolt is asked when his relationship with Chris allegedly occurred, and again, I'm jumping a little bit ahead of myself because this will be included in part 7, he conveniently tells investigators that they were in a relationship from June 2017 until late March, early April 2018. So again, perfectly convenient. So when you compare NK and Trent Bolt's perfectly synced timeframes, it piques one's curiosity, or at least it should. Then throw in NK's comment or text to Agent Kobach on the morning of August 29th before investigators had even gotten a chance to talk to him. It's right around the time everything kind of blew up in the news when she says, I do have some dates for things he said that I think are in line with some things the other man claimed. So when you think about it, I mean, realistically, what are the odds that both of their timelines are going to match up that specifically? I mean, especially considering the fact that neither one of them can produce anything to back that up. NK has organized this 7-page document of stuff she's remembered by date, and a lot of this information, as you look through it, you see is basically just passive-aggressive digs at Shanann with what seems to be very little evidentiary value. And then when you get to June 27th, this is the part where she talks about the condoms. And the only reason that I even feel this is relevant is for the reason I think it does tie into, in my opinion, in the other parts, as you see when I talk about July 14th. There's definite areas here that she's very focused on, and whether she's aware of it or realizing it or not, she gives away sometimes what she was focused on during their relationship. And the 627 information is a good example of that. And this part's never made sense to me because the obsessive researching of the condoms and all of the detail in that, whether or not they used condoms or not, has nothing to do with proving whether they were intimate or not with each other. She's pushing it off that way, but it doesn't make sense. What that research was about, in my opinion, but I think it's pretty obvious, is birth control. What she's really looking for in that research right there with the condoms is whether or not Shanann's pregnancy was an accident or intentional. And you'll see a few pages in here when we get to July 14th, which I've brought up in previous videos, so you already know why I think that day is important. But you'll see where I think that she slips up again, and it ties into this as well. When she talks about July 4th on here, she doesn't mention anything about getting mad at him that morning when he spent the night and Shanann called 10 times. She doesn't mention anything on here about showing up at his house upset and angry. She doesn't even mention the app this time. The whole thing on the 4th of July is her, again, talking about Chris's statements that from, secondhand of him making digs about Shanann and putting her down and talking about their house and how expensive their house payment was. And she remembers the exact amount of his house payment and even how much of that was homeowner's insurance. So yet again, she's remembering all the little details about things that were very important to her that bothered her and got under her skin, but yet cannot remember the content of the 111-minute phone call the night of the murders. Completely inconsistent, doesn't add up. She then goes on to talk about July 14th, which if you've listened to this series, you know that I think is a very important day. And we've talked about, what happened that day and why. But she goes on to talk about that. And yet again, in my opinion, attempts to create a narrative and a backstory to why she got upset that day that just doesn't seem to add up. And just to point out again, the patterns, or to me, they're like little Easter eggs in this discovery. But yet again, on July 14th, the little things that she's remembered, she brings up that very specific time frame again of late March, early April, as far as referring to when Chris tells her during that argument when the last time that he and Shanann were intimate. So again, this series is not me making any accusations or anything like that. It's just discovery right there in black and white mixed in with my opinions and interpretations on certain things. Everyone has to come to their own conclusions on what we're showing you. However, after you see these things time and time again, in my opinion, at some point they become tells. And to me, this time frame is very important to her. Then you have to just ask yourself why. We know from both Chris and NK that NK got upset that day after she dropped him off on the 14th. We know that she walked through the whole house, the basement, the upstairs, the girls' rooms, talked about the books. I'm sure there's a lot more that wasn't disclosed that we don't know that went on in the house or where she walked through that day. Something set her off, though. We do know that. So after she's set off by whatever it is, which, in my opinion, I've made clear what I think that it is. Halfway down the page, she specifically says that she starts quizzing him about when he was last intimate with Shanann and if they've used protection, and specifically states if they were actively trying to have a child. So it doesn't really make sense on why that would be such a huge deal or such a sticking point for her, because if you believe her timeline, they just became physically intimate about 2.5 weeks before this. So, and Shanann's been gone in North Carolina the entire time, and Kay knows that. So why would it matter if they were intimate before she left or before he was ever involved with NK? So, like I've said before, I think that she was fully aware. It was announced publicly in multiple posts on Facebook. We know that she was actively looking at both of their Facebook accounts. I think that with the information she put on her own notes, talking about the birth control, talking about when he was intimate, talking about they're actively trying to have a baby, I think that was her just getting really mad, walking around the house, being reminded of it. Maybe when they hung out at her house or they did other things, it wasn't on the forefront of her mind. But being there in Shanann's home and seeing the girl's stuff, who knows what else she saw, she got upset and it sparked the argument. And as we all know, it's all pieces of a puzzle, and it does matter because every little thing adds up to the murders. Chris even said himself that it was this date, around this time, that he actively started planning the murders. So all these little pieces matter in the motive and in the plans and what happened, but there's just so much that we still don't know. She then talks about how upset he was and how different he was following their big fight that next week, and how she asked him what was wrong, and he said it was basically her threatening to date other people. And this is conveniently, like I just said, when he said he started actively planning the murders. And at the same exact time, she starts pushing this mantra that she has, that she's been telling him from this point forward to go fix things with Shanann. Fix things with Shanann, while saying in the next sentence that their sex life suffered greatly, going from 3 to 4 times a day to 1 to 2 times a day. So that 3 to 4 times a day just throws me. I mean, they had jobs, right? Just leave in comments below if 3 to 4 times a day is a thing. From there, she just goes on to allegedly remembering one thing from their conversations when he was in North Carolina. And it's again a dig at Shanann. It's a secondhand conversation that she wasn't involved in. And she says that he talked to his friend Mark, and his friend Mark happens to bring up that in the past there was a question about her with money at an old company. Again, it has absolutely nothing to do with the investigation. And then her next thing that she talks about is the day after Chris gets back from North Carolina, he picks up the touch-up paint from the Toyota dealership and drives over to her house after work. This is also allegedly the day, according to Chris, that NK gave him a key to her place. We've never known her response to that because this information came out with Cadel, and it was long after the discovery came out. From there, she talks about their night at Lazy Dog, and the only thing she really remembers that's new there is that they briefly spoke about him opening up a new bank account without Shanann for him to sock away some money for his new start. From there, she skips right over Sunday and doesn't bring up anything about the 111-minute phone call, and the next thing she talks about is Monday, August 13th. She remembers that on the 13th, she again suggested that Chris get a second bank account without Shanann on it. It's just a little bit strange to me because this is after the cops have been there and she knows that they're looking for Shanann and the girls. In previous episodes of this series, we've already gone over August 13th and all of her phone calls in detail and everything that was in Discovery. So I'm not going to go into all of that, but there were a couple things in this new information dump that she gives that are worth hitting on. The biggest, most obvious thing here is that NK has a long list she gives them today of texts they exchanged on Monday, August 13th. None of this is in Discovery at all. So when we're watching the police body cam footage, we see Chris on his phone pretty much the entire time the cops are there. If you look at the phone records, which we do in a previous episode from that night and during the day on August 13th, they don't connect on the phone voice to voice until after 9 p.m. So this confirms and fills in a lot of the blanks that they were in constant communication while the police were there, and for whatever reason, this is completely omitted from Discovery. So if they did recover all of the texts that she deleted from the day on the 13th, it's interesting why they wouldn't include them in the Discovery when we pretty much see everything else. The very last thing she has listed on this date-wise is on August 14th, which is Tuesday, when he did the interviews, as we know. And throughout all these interviews, she's talked about how this was the day that she was really concerned, telling him that she didn't want to talk to him anymore until he found his family. So for the one piece of information she's remembered from August 14th, you'll see that it says text. Well, anything that's a text, she's fully aware that they may get a hold of it even though she deleted it, and so she's going to have to address it. And Tuesday was a big day. If you'll remember that in one of her versions, this is when she allegedly found out that Shanann was pregnant for the first time. This is when the canines were coming out that morning, and she had told him to move his truck so that Shanann wouldn't be supposedly afraid to come home. This was also when the media was coming out. She said they were fighting, and she was getting very concerned and scared and told him she didn't want to talk to him anymore. So it does seem very strange that he would text her about opening up this second bank account when that was the day that they had all of that going on. That was also the day that she asked him to delete all the conversations between the two of them, and when she deleted everything off of her phone. Now we've covered all of the interviews between NK and investigators, and it's so much information and so much to analyze, but I think that it helps to break it down like this. So this episode, part 6, was mainly to just tie everything together and then go over the few pieces of information that she gave on September 4th. And there are a few important pieces that will directly lead in and tie into part 7. And we're excited to share some of the new information that we found and get your opinions as well. So let us know what you think in comments. And as usual, if there's anything you have questions on or need clarification on or have information that you want to send us, just let us know. Also, please let us know if there's any other cases you'd like us to do a series like this on, or just any other cases in general that you'd like us to do a video on that we haven't. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you'll know when our new videos come out.